There are towns tucked so deep into the folds of the Appalachian Mountains that they vanish from maps and memory. Dunlowe was one of them. I hadn't heard the name until I was assigned to write a feature on the missing children of the coal belt. 4 vanished kids, all from the same county, one each year like clockwork. But when I asked about Dunlowe, even the state archives gave me a blank stare. The road to it wasn't on my map. I had to trace it from a 1920s surveyor's chart in the Charleston Gazette basement. The moment I crossed that rusted one-lane bridge, my radio cut out. My watch froze at 3:17, and though the sun still shone behind the grey clouds, I swear something in the trees was watching. I told myself I'd spend 2 days, just enough to dig, take notes, and leave. But on the solstice, Dunlowe doesn't let you leave, especially if it's your name they need. The village looked fossilized, frozen in time like an old photograph left too long in the sun. I parked near what must have once been a general store. Boards nailed over the windows, faded lettering that read, Dunlowe Mercantile. The air carried the weight of old coal ash and something sourer, like damp stone and decaying paper. No one greeted me, though I could see them. People moving just out of frame, like actors behind curtains. I knocked on a few doors. No one answered. Only one woman, grey-haired and mute, stared at me from a second-floor window until I left the porch. I checked into the only inn in town, the Dunlowe house. It stood crooked on its foundation, sagging from years of mountain weather. The man who greeted me, Abel, had hands like dried bark and eyes that didn't quite meet mine. He said little beyond the cost. No clocks in the room, no calendar, no radio. It felt like checking into a memory. I walked the streets that first night making notes. No laughter, no music, no children. Just oil lanterns flickering behind warped glass windows. A bell tower loomed in the square, rusted and frozen. The plaque read 1913 in memory of those taken. It took hours to find someone willing to speak. A boy, maybe 8 years old, sitting on a fence post near the woods. It comes when the sun dies, he said without looking at me. Mama says don't cry too loud. The hollow listens. Then he hopped down and vanished behind a crumbling stone wall. That night, I heard scratching outside my window. Just a few short strokes. Then nothing. I opened the curtain. Nothing was there. But my suitcase had been moved. The next morning, I found the first clue. Inside the chapel, hidden behind hymnals and crumbling pews, was a rusted box stuffed with yellowed clippings. Local reports, most undated, some handwritten, of children vanishing on the winter solstice. 1 each year, always between the hours of 3 p.m. and 4 p.m., and always under clear skies. None of the children were ever found. No bodies, no police investigations, no state alerts. The oldest article was from 1871. The most recent listed a girl named Eliza Hammond, age 6, disappeared without a trace. Her parents, the article claimed, remembered her only as a shadow in the corner of their eyes. I checked with county records. There was no listing for Dunlowe. The entire village didn't exist in any current documentation. Like it had quietly slipped out of the world's notice. Each day, the town felt heavier, the air thicker, as though time were folding inward. The people began to stare, not with suspicion, but with resignation, like they knew what I would soon discover. On my 4th day, I climbed the eastern ridge. Locals avoided it, but I'd seen it from a distance, stones arranged in a ring, lichen-covered and ancient. At the center lay a depression in the earth, blackened, as if something had been burned there. Bones littered the ground, small ones. The wind carried a sound like whispering. I turned, thinking someone had followed. There was no one. That night, I dreamed of the stones again, but this time I stood within them. Around me were dozens of people in homespun clothes, and a child knelt before me, holding out a hand. "You have to choose," he said. I woke drenched in sweat, the floor cold beneath my feet. By the 6th day, I wanted out. I packed my notes, loaded my camera, and tried to drive. The road wasn't there. I don't mean it was blocked. I mean it was gone. Where the bridge had been, only a ravine remained. I turned back, ready to confront the townsfolk, but the streets were empty. Even Abel was gone. The town square bell rang once. It was 3 p.m. And that's when I saw the procession. They emerged from homes like shadows, barefoot in the snow, holding torches and oil lamps. They walked toward the chapel, where the old bell hung rusted but suddenly whole. A child, no older than 5, was carried in a blanket by 2 older women. The child wasn't struggling. He looked dazed. I followed them, through the woods and up the ridge. They reached the stones from my dream, weathered pillars arranged in a circle. There were bones scattered between them. The townspeople formed a ring. No one wept. They began to chant, something in an older dialect I didn't recognize. It was rhythmic, guttural, like rocks grinding underwater. And then I saw it, a shape behind the trees, something tall, not quite human. It moved with a lurch, as if learning to walk. The flames dimmed as it approached. Even the snow stilled. I stepped back and snapped a photo. The click echoed like a gunshot. Dozens of heads turned. They stared at me, not with anger, but with recognition. The child looked at me, his eyes suddenly sharp, aware. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. I ran. Back to the boarding house, locked the door, hid the negatives, tried to breathe. At 3:17 p.m., exactly when my watch had frozen that first day, I heard footsteps outside, and then a knock. I didn't answer. I stayed in that room for hours. No one came again. That night, I dared to leave. The village was still, no torches, no chants, but in the square beneath the old war memorial, something new had been added. A stone, freshly carved. It read, "Thomas Elwood, departed, 1967. I ran to my car. It started. The road returned. I drove until I hit the interstate. I didn't look back. Back home, I developed the photos. The one from the ridge was blank. Only snow, no people, no stones, no child. Only one photo turned out. It was the town square, empty. But in the center, a figure stood staring into the lens. It was me, but my eyes were hollow. I stayed with my editor in Charleston for 2 days. I handed over the box of clippings and the single photograph. He laughed at first, then grew quiet. He said he'd send it to archives and have a fact checker call the county office. When I returned the next morning, the photo was gone. He claimed I never gave him anything. The box of clippings, nowhere to be found. I called the Charleston Gazette's library. No surveyor maps, no Dunlowe, nothing. I phoned the highway department. They said no road had existed in that region since a landslide in 1944. I drove out myself. The bridge wasn't there, not ruined, non-existent. I hiked in on foot, using compass and memory. But where the village had stood, I found only trees. Young ones, barely 2 decades old. No ruins, no inn, no stone circle. Only frostbitten leaves and silence. But I know what I saw. And every year on the winter solstice, at precisely 3:17 p.m., my watch stops ticking. Once, I woke to find a small carved stone on my pillow. No one had entered my locked apartment. It was the same kind of stone from Dunlowe Square, my name carved into it. Sometimes, in photographs I didn't take, I see myself standing far in the background, face turned just out of view, always in places I haven't been. Sometimes there are children near me. Sometimes one of them is Eliza Hammond. She looks older now. Last week I dreamed of her again. She stood at the foot of my bed barefoot, whispering, "You brought us back. They'll never forget now." Then I saw the hollow, in my room, in my walls, its shape, watching, growing closer. Tonight is the solstice, and my clock has already stopped. Before I left Charleston the second time, I tried one last thing. I visited my old college professor, Dr. Melvin Crane, an expert in Appalachian folklore. I told him only fragments, fearing he'd dismiss me. But when I mentioned Dunlowe and the hour of offering, he didn't laugh. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for a dusty tome from his shelf. "You're not the first to come asking," he said, "but no one ever returns a third time." He showed me a translated passage from an 18th century missionary's journal. It described a mountain sect that worshipped an unseen entity they called the Hollow Guest. Their rituals followed lunar cycles, especially the winter solstice. Children were offered not in malice, but to sustain the land, a small trade to preserve the boundary. I asked if he believed it. He said nothing, but he locked his door behind me. On my final night in Charleston, I stayed in a motel off Route 60. I couldn't sleep. The air felt too still. At 3:17 a.m., the motel's power died. I looked out the window and saw a child standing beneath the flickering sign. She waved. I blinked, and she was gone. Since then, I've tried to live quietly. I don't publish anymore. I don't go out after dark. I've sold every clock I owned, but it doesn't matter. Time bends around the solstice. Last December, my editor, Paul, vanished. His wife said he went to meet someone who left a package on their porch. The only item missing from his home was a photograph, the one of me in the Dunlowe Square. I've come to accept that there are places that don't obey our rules. Dunlowe is not forgotten. It forgets you, and when it remembers, you feel it. A chill behind the eyes, a sudden silence in a crowded room, a child staring at you like they know your name. They told me the hollow chooses who it needs, but sometimes it remembers who tried to run. They say there's no record of a place called Dunlowe, no town, no children, no stone wall of names. But sometimes, on the winter solstice, people report strange lights in the mountains of West Virginia, a glow that pulses like firelight, echoes of laughter and chanting that vanish when approached. Some hikers go missing. A few return days later with no memory of where they've been. One man claimed to wake beside a carved stone with his daughter's name etched into it. She'd been dead 10 years. I still dream of Dunlowe. Sometimes I see the child I met, older now, taller, eyes like mine. Other nights, I see myself in the stone circle, arms raised as the villagers chant around me. But the worst dream is the one where I'm back in my apartment, writing this very sentence. And then I look up and see myself reading it from the other side of the mirror, and my reflection isn't smiling anymore. Sometimes I wonder, did I ever leave Dunlowe? Or is the world that remembers me the one that isn't real? And so, the shadows stretch further, and the mystery only deepens. But this is far from the end. It's merely the beginning. What lingers beyond the door? Who is whispering your name? And what is that shifting in the corner of your eye? The answers await in the next chapter of these chilling tales. Subscribe to Nightfall Crypt and hit the notification bell, because the crypt's secrets are endless and the darkness never sleeps. Until next time, stay in the light if you can.